Hey, hey everybody. Hey, what's a metaphor? It's funny, right? None of you laughed. None of you laughed just now. Like I know it. Like you're watching this in the future, and I know it. You know what? Fuck you. I'm funny. But we are talking about metaphors this week. We're talking about things that represent other things and how we look at artifacts and see the effects of representing things as other things. That's our whole goal for now. So I hope you're excited. By the way, I hope you're all still doing okay. If you want to keep up checking in with me, please feel free. I kind of like the pen pal relationship I have with some of you right now, and I would love to keep it up. So keep talking to me. I'm stuck in my house just like you're stuck in yours. So let's make the most of it. Now, metaphorical criticism. Getting into this, I would like to congratulate you guys for being the only one of my classes where I think everybody watched the video. Yeah. I'm having a big problem with my 101 in particular, where I think maybe a third of the class watched my video lectures. If you guys have any advice about getting people enfranchised in the class on online, let me know, because otherwise I'm supposed to start flagging people on Starfish, and I don't want to do that. That just seems like a dick move. But whatever, I'll do it if necessary. You guys, though, you guys are my smart people, my dedicated people, my hardworking people, so please keep that up, because I'm really excited to see, in particular, what you do with this one. We're getting more abstract, aren't we, with these kinds of criticism, and the higher up we get, the more you're going to find that I'm not holding your hand, and you have to find things for yourself, you have to analyze them for yourself, and I'm not going to help you, Kenneth Burke's not going to help you, nobody's going to help you but you just have to draw your own conclusions. So for those of you that like having more freedom, this may be the criticism for you. We are talking about metaphorical criticism, and we are basing that obviously in the notion of a metaphor. Now, when you were teeny tiny, you learned what a metaphor is. This is something you learned in elementary school, right? A metaphor is a comparison. In the very, very literal sense of metaphor, it's a comparison where you say one thing is another thing. This class is a vacation, yeah? Or cats are dog-like. It's a comparison that makes something seem like something else. Now, we're taking that basic idea of a metaphor, and we're gonna spruce it up a little to make it more complicated, obviously, because this is college and this is what we do. And we're also going to make it broader. So basically what you're analyzing for as you do metaphorical criticism is what things are being made to look like other things, and what is the effect of that. So Foss's definition of metaphor is not just a comparison. And I'll read it to you, but obviously you have it in your book. A metaphor, or metaphors, I guess in general, are non-literal comparisons in which a word or phrase from one domain of experience is applied to a different domain. When you are saying that something is like something else that it's not normally related to. And she says a metaphor actually has two parts, and this is where we're really going to build on your high school understanding of things. A metaphor, this comparison between something and something else, begins with a tenor. A tenor is the idea being explained, and it's paired in the metaphor with a vehicle. The vehicle is the thing explaining the tenor. It makes sense if you think about whatever it is you're comparing in your metaphor as riding in a car. So let's say I was trying to come up with a metaphor about hedgehogs. So here's my hedgehog, and oh, I don't have a little toy car. That's so sad. We're going to imagine my hand is a little toy car. My hand, as the car, is going to take the hedgehog someplace. And if I were saying, this hedgehog is a lot like our government, then the government would be taking the hedgehog into somebody else's head to explain it in a way that is accessible, hopefully, for that person. So that's a tenor which is the thing being explained, riding in a vehicle, which is the thing explaining it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, email me and I will tell you about it for days. Now, when I say metaphor and when Voss says metaphor, keep in mind that she's really talking about any kind of comparison. So the distinctions that you learned in high school or middle school or elementary school between similes and metaphors and other comparative figures of speech, those get erased. So a simile counts as a metaphor. Synecdoche counts as a metaphor. Metonymy counts as a metaphor. Anything that compares two things is a metaphor. So, useful stuff, because one of the ways that speech makers or visual artists or anybody tries to relate an idea to a public is through analogy. They try to relate whatever they're trying to say to something that you already understand, and that makes you understand it better. So if I'm trying to introduce a new product and I want to make that product look interesting, let's say I want to make the product look sexy, then I am going to give you images of that product with souped up shiny cars and people who are not wearing a lot of clothes. And then all of a sudden you get, through that vehicle of the cars and the clothes, that the product is sexy without me having to say this product is sexy. So it's a comparison. It's also something that's not especially literal, right? Remember, part of this definition is non-literal. So it doesn't have to be me looking in a camera and saying, this product is sexy. It's me showing you by association. As long as there's an analogy there, then it counts as metaphorical criticism. Aristotle says that it makes things extraordinary, which is why it's appealing to people. Cicero says that metaphor, and this is a fun quotation, throws a luster on language. It makes language shiny, is what he's saying. And that's fucking fun, right? And you have to especially focus on metaphor, because where we think language is shiny is where we pay attention to it but stop thinking about it. We're just like, oh, that was pretty, and now I'm going to move on and accept what they said because it was shiny. So analyze that shiny language. That's our mission this week. Now, Floss obviously in your chapter offered some cautions against the use of metaphor. First of all, she said a metaphor should not be ridiculous. It should not be far-fetched. So, for example, at the beginning of this lecture, when I said that this class is a vacation, that's obviously a little far-fetched because you have to work. You're not at Disney World. Any number of reasons that I'm trying to make the class seem tranquil and relaxing, but it's not. It's a class. It's not supposed to be. But it has to make sense. The metaphor that you're making has to connect the tenor and the vehicle in a way that makes sense to people. Also, she cautions you that you have to clarify the comparison. So it would be one thing for me to say to somebody, hey, my cat acts just like a dog. They would probably look at me and be like, well, how? Like, does your cat pee outside? Does your cat eat milk bones? Like, I don't understand. So a lot of the times metaphors take some clarification, some clarity. Otherwise, they're not going to make sense to their target audience. Now, we'll talk about in a minute that sometimes visual metaphors are incredibly instantaneous, but verbal ones, at least, can have that issue. Speaking of visual metaphors, I do not want you to walk out of this lecture thinking that metaphorical criticism can only be used with something that's a text, something that has words in it, because metaphors can be made visually just as easily as they can be made with you actually crafting a sentence that says this class is a vacation. Metaphors can be visual, which means this style of criticism can apply to a lot of different artifacts, anything that makes a comparison. There are three kinds of visual metaphors, and these are important, especially because if we just say, oh, well, this is a picture that makes a comparison, we're not really getting at how, and how is the whole point of doing this kind of criticism. So let's go through the three kinds of visual metaphors. The first kind is Substitution. Substitution is where you only see the tenor, you only see the thing being discussed, or you only see the vehicle. You only see the explanation. A good example of this, if you would like to Google it, and I may send it out on Monday. I'm recording this on Saturday, by the way, because I'm having a very fun weekend. There's a Dolce & Gabbana ad that's really, really rapey. And basically all you see in the Dolce & Gabbana ad is a woman being subjectified in a very sexually prone way in front of a very powerful looking dude, and everybody's wearing Dolce & Gabbana jeans. Yeah. So there you're really only seeing the tenor. The vehicle is kind of left up to your imagination. That's what substitution does. The next kind of visual metaphor is called fusion. Fusion is where the tenor and object are, they're, how do I say this? The tenor and the vehicle are both partially present, but you have to connect them in your head yourself. A good example of this is Smokey the Bear. Now, I want you to imagine, I don't think you even need to Google Smokey the Bear, but if you do, do it right now. Hold on, I will wait. Smokey the Bear. And it doesn't matter what image of Smokey the Bear you wind up with. He is pointing at you. He's probably got a shovel or something in his hand. He looks real woodsman-y, and he's telling you something about how you can prevent forest fires. Now, what the shit does a bear have to do with forest fires? Okay. He's dressed up like a park ranger, so he makes you think of national parks or state parks. He is also a piece of nature, and I think we discredit this because we anthropomorphize him because he's talking and pointing and commanding. But we see a little bit of nature, we see a little bit of the custodians of nature, and all of that is coming together and pointing at us. So the comparison here is that we are communing with the administration of nature and with nature itself, and we see both of them a little bit. But overall, comparing us with a really natural kind of park ranger, that's never made explicit. Smokey the Bear doesn't point at you and say, you're a part of this. Yeah. Smokey the Bear just says, you should prevent forest fires, and hopefully you do. Hopefully you listen to Smokey, but that's fusion. Okay. The last kind of visual metaphor is juxtaposition. Isn't that a fun word? I like saying that word. I like to work that word into conversations. It's fun. Juxtaposition is where the tenor and the vehicle are juxtaposed separately in the same visual space. It's interesting in juxtaposition. It's hard to tell what's the tenor and what's the vehicle because basically they both are there. They're both visually present. They both exist, and you have to figure out which one of them is being used to explain the other. So, Google this. Furby with a knife. You know what a Furby is, right? It was one of those little toys from like, I don't know, late 90s, early 1000s, and then they came out with new ones that were even creepier. But they're mechanical, they have big ears, they have big eyes, and they talk. They talk in the middle of the night when you're not even playing with them. They're fucking creepy. But if you Google a Furby with a knife, you see this adorable children's toy, and you see it holding a knife, and it's scary. And you have to figure out, why is that there's this Furby, and there's this weapon, how do they go together? And the ultimate message of the image is, Furby is going to kill you. They're saying that Furby is murderous, and which is, it's a funny juxtaposition, because Furby can't kill you, but can he? I don't know. But the point is, you have both elements there, and you have to put them together. That's juxtaposition. So those are the three kinds of visual metaphors. Be very aware that visual metaphors exist, and you should be looking for them, because often they're the ones we ignore, but that's what makes them even more powerful. They're tricky. So, here's how you do metaphorical criticism. There are 4 steps. 4 steps to doing metaphorical criticism. These steps happen in sequence. Do them in order, beginning with step 1. Step one is examine the artifact. Uh, there's not a lot of specific instruction here. You just look at the artifact, you crawl around in it, you get comfy with your artifact, and you do this because you can't understand what a metaphor is doing in a piece unless you understand the entire piece. Now, you need to understand here that metaphors work toward a broader message. Yeah, they're not in there because they really want you to think the hedgehog is like the government. They want you to think the hedgehog is like the government because they want you to like the government. See, there's always a broader goal involved. So you have to examine the whole artifact before you even start looking for metaphors. Then, step two, isolate the metaphors. This is where you actively start looking for all the comparisons, all the kinds of comparisons that happen in your piece. And Foss makes very clear these have to be nouns that you are looking for. Comparisons have to happen between nouns. Otherwise, it's not a comparison, it's a description. So, step two is look for metaphors. And we should be very clear here that metaphors are not always explicit. For example, if you listen to President Obama's first inaugural address, he spends a lot of time using language that explains the former administration, the George W. Bush administration's actions in terms of weather. And it's interesting because at no point does Obama say something like George W. Bush was like a lightning storm. But instead, he will use weather-related language to discuss the Bush administration, and that's your metaphor, yeah? There's a direct comparison in there, even if it's not being slapped in your face. So find those comparisons, even if they're tacit, even if they're kind of under the radar. Find them. And then, step three, sort them. Make a list of all the metaphors that you found in the piece you were looking at, and then group them together, either by the tenor or by the vehicle. So, assuming that in the example I just gave that the tenor is the Bush administration and the vehicle is the weather, then you could go through that speech and find all the places where the Bush administration is discussed, and that would help you find all of the different metaphors surrounding it. By the same token, you may be reading something and you may notice that one of the underpinnings of it is it keeps describing a lot of things as being sexy because it wants to sell them. So then you find all the things that were described as being sexy. That's being grouped by the vehicle. So you group either by the tenor or the vehicle. And then step four, we're already here, step four is where you look for an explanation for what the artifact is doing. What is it trying to say? Why is it trying to say that? Usually you will see trends. When you find all these metaphors and you group them together, you're going to see trends in them, and those trends will explain something about the motivation behind the artifact. For example, in the Obama inaugural, why on earth would Obama be comparing the former Bush administration's actions to the weather? Like, of all the metaphors in the world, why did he go there? Well, because what is the weather like? The weather is inevitable. The weather is uncontrollable. You can't fix the weather. So what Obama is doing is making the Bush administration's actions seem like a force to be reckoned with that he has to deal with in the aftermath instead of something he could have prevented at the time, or instead of something that was in any way something that we could change the effects of, just like the weather. That's what you're doing in metaphorical criticism. You find the metaphors and you figure out why they're there, which gives you insight into the motivation of the piece. So that's your 4 steps of metaphorical criticism. 1, look at the whole artifact. You got to read the whole thing. 2, figure out what the metaphors are. 3, sort the metaphors together. And 4, find an explanation for why they're there and what the artifact is trying to do with them. So if you can do those things, you can do this criticism. Now, like I said, this criticism is really just you poking around in a piece. There's not as much guidance here. You have a lot more freedom, and you get to draw a lot more conclusions. which makes you very powerful. Congratulations, you have the world in your hands. And yet at the same time, that gives you a little less guidance, so you're just going to have to muck around in there yourself and see what you find. So, do it. And here's a little test you can do to see if you can figure this out. And this is fun. This one, I promise you, is fun. And you may be thinking, fuck you, Sills, I'm not going to do anything but listen to this lecture and write my papers, but do this because it's fucking funny. Google sexist Burger King ads. And when the sexist Burger King ads pop up, and they will, I want you to see if you can figure out what's going on with them. I want you to see if you can figure out what the tenors and the vehicles are and why they're associated with each other. What message is Burger King trying to convey about its sandwiches, among other things? And then see where we land. That's your goal for explaining this. Now, getting into doing your method eval, be sure you read that artifact closely, because again, this kind of criticism is under the surface, so it's not going to have something that really smacks you in the face. But if you read the artifact closely, you can still get an idea of the effects of metaphorical criticism. And here's your Easter egg for this week, because I would like to be entertained. I am, for 2 points of extra credit, giving you an opportunity to, 1, send me an image. Send me an image that you think makes some kind of comparison. And then after you do that, in the same email with the image, tell me which of the 3 kinds of visual metaphor it is. Tell me if it's substitution, is it fusion, is it juxtaposition? Tell me why. And if you do that, I will give you those 2 glorious points of extra credit, and I'll just generally be happy that you're talking to me. So do that. Do that, and if you have any questions at all, shoot me an email or schedule a Zoom conversation and we'll hang out. In the meantime, I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all smarter than the people I ran into at Kessler's this morning who are out and touching stuff and getting in people's way and generally being real, not germ safe. Just make good decisions and we'll all get out of this much quicker. All right, y'all have a good week. Miss you.